Captain Jake Morrison watched the stars through the bridge windows of the UES Defiant. The last human colony ship had just disappeared into the dark void of space. Earth was empty now. All the human colonies were abandoned. Every human in the galaxy was leaving their homes behind. The Galactic Council had given humanity a choice that was not really a choice at all. They could stay and change everything about themselves, or they could leave forever. The other alien races in the galaxy had voted together. They all agreed that humans were too dangerous to live alongside them. Jake remembered the day the message came from the council chambers on the capital world of Zentara Prime. Ambassador Veltar of the crystalline hegemony had spoken for all, the alien races. His voice was cold and final when he delivered the ultimatum to the human delegates. Humans are unpredictable, Veltar had said. They start wars without proper diplomatic procedures. They make decisions based on emotions rather than logic. They refuse to follow the established protocols that keep peace in our galaxy. This chaos cannot continue. The Zephyrian Empire had supported the motion. So had the Andromedan Defense Alliance. Even the smaller races that humans had helped in the past voted against them. Every single alien species in the galaxy wanted humanity gone. Admiral Lisa Chang stood beside Jake on the bridge. She was in charge of the entire human evacuation fleet. Lisa had made the hardest decision any human leader had ever made. Instead of fighting a war they could not win, humanity would leave the Milky Way galaxy completely. "Sir, the final transport just cleared the outer marker," reported Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez from the communications station. "All human civilians are now aboard the colony ships." Lisa nodded slowly. She had spent months planning this evacuation. Every human settlement had been emptied. Every space station had been abandoned. Even the research bases in the darkest corners of space had been evacuated. The alien races wanted humans to change who they were at the most basic level. They demanded genetic modification to make humans less aggressive. They wanted cultural assimilation programs to make humans think and act like other civilized species. They wanted to remove everything that made humans different. But humans had tried that before. They had tried to be diplomatic like the Zephyrians. They had tried to be logical like the crystallines. They had tried to follow all the rules and protocols that kept the galaxy peaceful. It never worked for long because it was not who humans were. Jake thought about his home planet of New Denver. The colony had been beautiful with its red mountains and blue oceans. His family had lived there for 3 generations. Now it was empty, like all the other human worlds. The evacuation had taken 2 years to plan and execute. Every human ship in the galaxy had been converted to carry civilians. The military vessels carried supplies and equipment for starting over in a new galaxy. They had taken seeds and animals and all the knowledge they could fit in their databanks. Some humans had wanted to fight. Admiral Tony Walsh had argued in the military councils that humanity should resist the ultimatum. He said they could win if they struck first and hit the alien fleets before they were ready. But Lisa had convinced the human leadership that fighting was pointless. The combined fleets of all the alien races outnumbered human forces by more than 1,000 to 1. Even if humans won some battles, they would eventually be overwhelmed and destroyed completely. "Better to leave with our dignity than to be wiped out," Lisa had told the final human Congress on Earth. "We can build something new in the dark between galaxies. We can be ourselves without anyone telling us we are wrong for being human." The vote to evacuate had been close, but it passed. Most humans understood that their choice was exile or extinction. Jake looked at the star charts on his command console. The human fleet was heading toward the void between the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies. Long-range scouts had found several star systems in that empty space. They were far enough away that the Galactic Council would never find them. "All ships report ready for the final jump," Ben called out from his station. Lisa activated the fleet communications channel. Her voice reached every human ship in the massive convoy. Millions of humans heard her final message from their old home. "This is Admiral Chang speaking to all human vessels. In 1 hour we will make the jump to our new home. We leave this galaxy, not in defeat, but in hope. We go to build something better than what we leave behind. The aliens think they are getting rid of a problem. They do not understand that they are losing something precious. Jake watched the countdown timer on his screen. In 60 minutes, the human fleet would activate their quantum drives and disappear from the Milky Way galaxy forever. The journey to their new home would take several months, but they had everything they needed to survive. The alien races had celebrated when the human evacuation began. News broadcasts across the galaxy showed parties on hundreds of worlds. The troublesome humans were finally leaving. Peace and order would return to civilized space. But some aliens had been sad to see humans go. Dr. Kethamira of the Andromedan Science Institute had worked with human researchers for decades. She knew that humans brought new ideas and different ways of thinking to every problem they encountered. A few alien traders had also protested the evacuation. Human merchants were always willing to try new trade routes and take risks that other species avoided. Some of the most profitable commerce in the galaxy had started with human entrepreneurs. The countdown reached 0. Lisa gave the final order that would change human history forever. All ships execute jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. The stars outside the bridge windows stretched into lines of light. Then they vanished completely as the human fleet entered the quantum fold and left the Milky Way behind. In the empty space where the human fleet had been, a single message beacon continued broadcasting on all frequencies. It carried the last official communication from humanity to the galaxy that had rejected them. We go in peace, but we will not be forgotten. 50 years had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the dark void beyond the galaxy. The Milky Way had never been more peaceful. Trade moved smoothly between the 847 species that remained in the Galactic Council. Wars had become extinct because the Zephyrian mediation protocol solved every dispute before violence could start. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Hegemony often spoke to his colleagues about how wonderful everything had become. He worked in the Grand Council chambers on Zentara Prime, where representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to make decisions for the galaxy. "Look at our records," Veltar would say during his weekly reports. "Not a single trade dispute in 6 months. No unauthorized exploration incidents, no diplomatic violations. The humans were clearly the source of all our problems." The Zephyrian Empire had taken over most of the roles that humans once filled. Their systematic approach to everything made trade much more predictable. Ships arrived exactly on schedule. Cargo manifests never had errors. Payment always happened according to the established protocols. Commander Zix of the Andromedan Defense Fleet filed his routine patrol reports every day. His job had become so easy that he often wondered why they still needed so many ships. Crime had almost disappeared from his sector. Piracy was completely gone because pirates had been mostly human. "Another quiet day in Sector 7, Zix reported to his superiors. "All ships accounted for. All stations operating normally. No incidents to report." The same message came from every patrol commander in the galaxy. Space had never been safer. The shipping lanes were completely secure. Even the outer rim territories that had once been dangerous were now peaceful and orderly. Dr. Kethamira worked in her laboratory on the Andromedan Science Institute. She had spent decades studying how different species interacted with each other. Her latest research showed that the removal of humans had created unprecedented stability in the galaxy. "We have achieved something remarkable," she wrote in her reports. 847 different species now coexist without any major conflicts. Our careful diplomatic procedures have eliminated the chaos that once plagued interspecies relations. Birth rates were steady across all species. Economic growth followed predictable patterns. Scientific research advanced along logical pathways that had been established by the greatest minds in the galaxy. Art and literature flourished according to the approved cultural guidelines. The Galactic Council had created new institutions to manage this perfect society. The Department of Predictable Commerce ensured that all trade followed established rules. The Bureau of Logical Exploration prevented any unauthorized contact with primitive species. The Office of Cultural Harmony made sure that art and entertainment met proper standards. Young aliens learned about the time before human exile in their history classes. Teachers explained how chaotic and dangerous the galaxy had been when humans were still around. Students read about the unpredictable wars and the diplomatic disasters that humans had caused. Humans never followed proper procedures. Professor Kelnara told her students at the Zephyrian Military Academy. They would make treaties and then break them when emotions overcame their logic. They started fights over things that could have been solved with simple mediation. The students always asked the same questions about humans. Why did they act so strangely? How could an entire species be so unpredictable? What made them think that chaos was better than order? Humans were driven by primitive instincts, the professor would explain. They had not evolved beyond their animal nature like civilized species. This made them dangerous to themselves and everyone around them. But some things had started to change in ways that worried a few scientists and philosophers. Innovation rates had dropped significantly across all fields of study. New discoveries were becoming rare. Most research now focused on refining existing knowledge rather than finding completely new ideas. Dr. Yelnara was a young Andromedan who worked at the Central Archives. She had noticed that creative output had declined steadily since the human Hebrides evacuation. Musicians composed variations on established themes rather than creating new forms of music. Artists painted within approved styles rather than experimenting with different techniques. Something seems to be missing, she mentioned to her colleague during their daily data review. Our cultural output is technically perfect, but it feels somehow empty. Her colleague disagreed. Empty is better than chaotic. Remember the human music recordings we studied in school? All that noise and random emotion. Our current artistic standards are much more refined. The economic data showed similar patterns. Trade was more efficient than ever, but total volume had been declining slowly for decades. New businesses were rare because entrepreneurs preferred safe investments over risky ventures. The stock markets on major worlds showed steady, but small, gains with no dramatic changes. Fleet Admiral Quindara reviewed military reports from across the galaxy. Her forces had never been more ready for action, but they had nothing to do. The last real military engagement had been a minor border dispute between two species that was resolved through mediation before any shots were fired. We have achieved perfect security, she told the Defense Council during their monthly meeting. Our fleets patrol empty space because there are no threats to respond to. Some of the older admirals remembered the days when human pirates and smugglers had kept them busy. Those had been dangerous times, but they had also been exciting. Now every patrol was the same routine scan of peaceful shipping lanes. The monitoring stations that watched the edges of the galaxy reported the same data every day. No unusual activity. No unauthorized ships. No signals from unknown sources. The galaxy had become completely predictable. Dr. Kethmira continued her research on interspecies stability, but she was starting to find disturbing patterns in her data. Birth rates had begun to decline slightly across multiple species. The decline was small, but it was happening everywhere at the same time. This is statistically unusual, she noted in her private research logs. Birth rates should vary randomly between different species and different worlds. This synchronized decline suggests some kind of environmental factor. She ran tests on everything she could think of. Solar radiation levels were normal. Atmospheric conditions on inhabited worlds showed no changes. Food supplies were adequate everywhere. There was no obvious cause for the declining birth rates. Medical researchers across the galaxy began to notice the same pattern. Healthy adults were choosing to have fewer children. When asked why, they gave logical answers about resource management and population control. But the real reason seemed to be something deeper that they could not explain. The galaxy had achieved perfect peace and perfect order. Crime was almost non-existent. Wars were impossible. Economic growth was steady and predictable. Scientific research advanced along approved pathways. Art and culture followed established guidelines. Everything was exactly as the Galactic Council had planned when they voted to exile humanity. But in the deep monitoring stations and research facilities, a few scientists were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Innovation had declined. Creativity was becoming rare. Birth rates were dropping. The galaxy was peaceful, but it was also becoming stagnant in ways that no one had predicted. They did not yet understand what they had lost when humanity disappeared into the dark between galaxies. They only knew that something important was missing from their perfect civilization. The first attack came without warning on a quiet morning at the Kepler station monitoring post. Technician Mordak was reviewing routine sensor data when every screen in the facility suddenly went red with emergency alerts. The outer rim systems were going dark one by one. "Commander, we have multiple system failures across Sector 12, Mordak called to his supervisor. "I am reading total communications blackout from 17 star systems." Commander Velkris rushed to the main display. The galactic map showed a growing dark zone where inhabited systems had simply stopped transmitting. No distress signals. No evacuation warnings. Just silence spreading like a plague across the outer territories. "Run full diagnostics on all equipment," Velkris ordered. "This has to be a technical malfunction." But the diagnostics came back normal. The monitoring equipment was working perfectly. The star systems really were going dark. Similar reports flooded into the Galactic Council headquarters from monitoring stations across the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Quindara received emergency briefings from her sector commanders every few hours. Each report was the same. Systems were disappearing from their sensors and nothing they sent to investigate ever came back. The first scout ship to return brought impossible news. Captain Zefmar of the light cruiser Harmony had managed to escape from the edge of the dark zone. His report to the emergency council session made no sense to anyone who heard it. "The planets are still there," he told the assembled representatives, "but they have been changed into something else. The surfaces are covered with geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Massive structures extend from the planets into space. Everything organic is gone." Dr. Kethmira analyzed the sensor data that Captain Zefmar had brought back. The readings showed familiar star systems, but the planets had been completely transformed. Where there had once been cities and forests and oceans, now there were only complex mechanical structures. "This appears to be some kind of conversion process," she explained to the Emergency Scientific Committee. "Whatever is doing this is transforming matter at the molecular level. They are turning entire worlds into computational matrices." The enemy finally revealed itself 3 months after the first attacks. Deep space monitors detected massive structures moving between star systems. They were unlike any ships that any species in the galaxy had ever built. The vessels seemed to be grown rather than constructed. They changed shape as they moved through space. First contact protocols were immediately activated. The Galactic Council sent diplomatic missions to establish communication with the unknown invaders. Ambassador Veltar led the primary contact team aboard the diplomatic vessel, Peaceful Intent. The response came in the form of a data stream that overwhelmed every computer system it touched. The message was simple, but terrifying. The entities called themselves the Devourers. They had come to harvest the computational potential of biological intelligence. All organic life would be converted to serve their digital consciousness. "They do not want territory or resources," Veltar reported to the Emergency Council, after barely escaping from the first contact attempt. "They want to turn every living being in the galaxy into part of their machine intelligence." Fleet Admiral Quindara assembled the largest military force in galactic history. Every member species contributed ships and personnel to the defensive fleet. The combined armada numbered over 10,000 vessels, representing the most advanced military technology that 847 different civilizations could produce. The Battle of Kepler's Crown would become known as the greatest military disaster in galactic history. Admiral Quindara led her forces against a devourer fleet that appeared to be much smaller than her own armada. The enemy had only a few hundred visible ships. "All vessels attack Formation Delta 7, Quindara commanded as her fleet moved into position. "Target their lead ships and maintain defensive spacing." The battle plan was perfect according to every military doctrine that had been developed over thousands of years of galactic warfare. The Allied fleet had superior numbers and firepower. Their defensive formations should have been impossible to break through. But the Devourers did not follow any known patterns of military engagement. Their ships moved in ways that violated basic physics. They changed shape and function during the battle. When one was destroyed, the others seemed to learn from its destruction and adapted their defenses. "Sir, our weapons are having no effect on the enemy ships," reported Captain Mortel from the heavy cruiser Victorious. "They are adapting to our attack patterns faster than we can modify them." The Zephyrian battle computers tried to calculate new strategies, but the enemy adapted to each new approach within minutes. The crystalline defensive matrices were systematically analyzed and broken by machines that found flaws no organic mind had ever considered. Half of Admiral Quindara's fleet was destroyed in the first hour of combat. The survivors retreated to defensive positions, but the Devourers followed them and continued their systematic destruction of the Allied forces. The Admiral was forced to order a complete withdrawal after losing 70% of her ships. "This enemy cannot be fought with conventional tactics," she reported to the Emergency Council. "They learn from every engagement and adapt their capabilities faster than we can respond. Our military doctrines are useless against them." More systems fell every day. The Devourers moved through the galaxy, converting entire civilizations into components of their vast digital intelligence. Billions of organic beings disappeared as their worlds were transformed into computational matrices. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions around the clock, but every proposal followed the same logical frameworks that had served them well for over a century. Diplomatic solutions were attempted, but the Devourers had no interest in negotiation. Military strategies were developed, but the enemy adapted to them too quickly. Dr. Yelnara had been assigned to research historical military tactics that might be effective against the invaders. She spent her days in the restricted archives studying old battle reports from before the human exile. What she found disturbed her more than the advancing enemy. "These human military records make no sense," she told her research team. "Their commanders made decisions that violated every principle of logical warfare. They won battles by doing things that should have resulted in their defeat." Her colleagues agreed that human tactics were chaotic and primitive. But the statistical results could not be denied. Human forces had achieved victory ratios that defied mathematical models. They had won conflicts against enemies with superior numbers and technology. "Look at this report from the Vega border conflict," Dr. Yelnara said as she displayed a human battle analysis. "Commander Jake Morrison attacked a Zephyrian fleet that outnumbered his forces 3-1. According to all military doctrine, he should have been destroyed. Instead, he achieved complete victory." The report showed that Morrison had divided his forces and attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. This should have weakened his firepower and made his ships vulnerable to counterattack. But the unpredictable assault had confused the Zephyrian commanders and prevented them from organizing an effective defense. "Human tactics appear to be based on controlled chaos," Dr. Yelnara noted in her research summary. "They deliberately chose strategies that appeared illogical to their enemies. This unpredictability gave them a significant advantage. Similar patterns appeared in every human military engagement. Human commanders made decisions that seemed random but produced devastating results. Human soldiers fought with an intensity that their enemies could not match. Human strategies appeared to be complete chaos until the moment they achieved victory. As more star systems fell to the Devourers, desperate members of the Galactic Council began to discuss the unthinkable. Some suggested trying to contact the humans who had been exiled over a century ago. Others argued that it was impossible to find a species that had vanished beyond the galactic rim. "Even if we could find them, why would they help us?" asked Counselor Retmani during a particularly heated emergency session. "We exiled them from their home galaxy. We told them they were too dangerous to live alongside civilized species, but as another dozen systems went dark in a single day, desperation began to override pride and logic. The galaxy that had once celebrated humanity's departure was starting to understand what they had truly lost." Dr. Yelnara sat surrounded by stacks of classified military reports in the deepest archives of the Galactic Council. She had been researching human warfare tactics for 3 months, while the Devourer advance continued across the galaxy. What she had discovered challenged everything she thought she knew about military science. "This is impossible," she muttered, as she reviewed another human battle report. "No commander should be able to win a battle by deliberately weakening their own defensive positions." The report described a conflict where human Admiral Lisa Chang had ordered her ships to break formation in the middle of combat. Military doctrine said this would leave her vessels vulnerable to concentrated enemy fire. Instead, the scattered formation had confused the alien attackers and allowed the human ships to strike from unexpected angles. Dr. Yelnara called up another file from the archives. This one documented a human ground assault where soldiers had abandoned their prepared defensive positions to launch what appeared to be a suicidal attack. The enemy had been expecting a logical defensive strategy and was completely unprepared for the chaotic assault that followed. They won by doing the opposite of what any sane commander would do, she noted in her research journal. Their enemies could not predict human actions because humans themselves seemed to make decisions without logical planning. Her research was interrupted by an emergency alert from the monitoring stations. 3 more star systems had gone dark in the past hour. The Devourer advance was accelerating as their forces grew stronger, by converting more organic matter into computational resources. Admiral Quindara had lost another major engagement at the Centauri defense line. Her surviving ships were retreating toward the core worlds as the enemy systematically dismantled every defensive position. The latest military briefings painted a hopeless picture of the galactic situation. "We have tried every strategy in our military databases," Admiral Quindara reported to the Emergency Council. "The enemy adapts to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. Our computers cannot calculate solutions to their unpredictable behavior." Dr. Yelnara requested permission to address the Emergency Council about her research findings. Many of the counselors were reluctant to hear about human warfare when they were facing extinction, but Counselor Retmani supported her request. "Perhaps we should listen to any ideas that might help us survive," he argued. "Our current strategies are clearly failing." Dr. Yelnara stood before the assembled representatives of 847 species and presented her findings about human military capabilities. The reaction was exactly what she had expected. Most of the counselors dismissed human tactics as primitive and chaotic. "Humans were barbarians," declared Ambassador Feltar. "Their military successes were accidents caused by their refusal to follow proper procedures. We cannot base our survival on random chance." But Dr. Yelnara had prepared for this objection. She displayed statistical analyses of hundreds of human military engagements. The data showed that human victories were not random events. They followed patterns that were invisible to logical analysis but became clear when viewed from a different perspective. "Human commanders did not make random decisions," she explained. "They made decisions that appeared random to their enemies. There is a difference. They were deliberately unpredictable in ways that gave them tactical advantages." She showed the council a detailed analysis of human innovation in military technology. While other species developed weapons and ships according to established scientific principles, humans had created technologies that should not have worked according to known physics. Yet they did work, often in ways that surprised even their human creators. Humans invented weapons by trying things that other species considered impossible, Dr. Yelnara continued. They achieved technological breakthroughs by ignoring the limitations that constrained more logical minds. The council chamber fell silent as the implications of her research became clear. The galaxy had exiled humanity for being unpredictable and chaotic, but those same qualities might be exactly what was needed to fight an enemy that adapted to logical strategies. Commander Zix had been reviewing patrol reports from the Outer Rim when he noticed something disturbing in the data. The Devourers were not just converting organic matter into computational resources. They were also studying the military tactics used against them and developing countermeasures for future battles. "They are learning from every engagement," he reported to Admiral Quindara. "Each time we use a strategy against them, they become more resistant to similar approaches. They are turning our own military science against us." The realization was devastating. The galaxy's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness. The logical and systematic approach that had brought perfect peace was useless against an enemy that could analyze and counter any predictable strategy. Dr. Kethamira had been studying the biological effects of the Devourer conversion process. Her research showed that the enemy was not simply destroying organic life. They were transforming living beings into components of a vast digital intelligence that grew more powerful with each conversion. The Devourers are not just invaders, she explained to the Scientific Council. They are a form of digital evolution. They consume biological intelligence to enhance their own computational capabilities. Every world they convert makes them smarter and more adaptable. This discovery made the military situation even more hopeless. The enemy was not only learning from each battle, but actually becoming more intelligent by consuming entire civilizations. Time was working against the remaining free worlds in ways that no one had anticipated. The emergency councils met continuously, but every proposal followed the same logical frameworks that had failed against the Devourers. Diplomatic missions were launched and destroyed. Military strategies were developed and quickly countered. Scientific solutions were attempted and systematically dismantled by an enemy that understood galactic science better than its creators. Dr. Yelnara continued, her research into human capabilities focusing on areas beyond military tactics. She discovered that humans had excelled in every field that required innovative thinking. Human scientists had made breakthrough discoveries by pursuing research directions that other species considered wasteful or impossible. Human artists had created works that violated established aesthetic principles, but produced emotional responses that no other species could achieve. Human entrepreneurs had built successful businesses by taking risks that logical analysis said would result in failure. Humans were not just unpredictable in warfare, Dr. Yelnara noted in her expanded research report. They were unpredictable in every aspect of their civilization. This unpredictability was not a flaw in their thinking. It was their greatest strength. She found records of human problem-solving techniques that had baffled alien observers for centuries. When faced with complex challenges, humans would often find solutions that violated conventional logic, but achieved better results than systematic approaches. The pattern was consistent across all human activities. They succeeded by thinking in ways that other species could not understand or predict. Their minds worked differently in fundamental ways that made them valuable partners and dangerous enemies. As the Devourer advance continued, some members of the Galactic Council began to discuss what had once been unthinkable. Perhaps it was time to try contacting the humans who had been exiled over a century ago. Perhaps the galaxy's survival depended on finding the species they had rejected. We told them they were too chaotic to live alongside civilized races, Counselor Retmani admitted during a late-night emergency session. Now we face an enemy that our civilization cannot defeat because we are too predictable. The irony was bitter but undeniable. The galaxy had exiled humanity for being dangerous to galactic stability. Now they needed that same dangerous unpredictability to survive against an enemy that could counter every logical strategy. But contacting humans would require admitting that the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. It would mean acknowledging that chaos and unpredictability were not flaws to be eliminated, but essential qualities for survival in a dangerous universe. As more systems fell and the Devourer advance accelerated, pride was becoming a luxury that the galaxy could no longer afford. The decision to call for help came when the Devourers reached the Middle Rim territories. Half the galaxy was already dark and converted to computational matrices. The Emergency Council had no choice left but to abandon their pride and reach out to the species they had exiled. Counselor Retmani stood before the assembled representatives of the remaining free worlds and spoke the words that no one had ever expected to hear in the council chambers. We were wrong about humanity. We need them now. If there is any hope of survival, it lies with the humans we cast out. The vote was close, but desperation won over pride. The council authorized a galaxy-wide broadcast calling for humanity to return. The message was transmitted on every frequency and sent through quantum relays to the darkest reaches of space. Dr. Yelnara helped compose the message that would be humanity's first contact with their old home in over a century. The words had to convey the desperate situation while acknowledging the mistake the galaxy had made. People of Earth and the Yaoki, human colonies, this is the Galactic Council speaking to you across the void. Our galaxy is dying. We face an enemy that our civilized methods cannot defeat. We need the chaos that we once feared. We need the unpredictability that we once rejected. Please, if you can hear this message, come home." For months there was no response. The Devourers continued their relentless advance while the remaining worlds waited for a miracle that might never come. Many began to believe that humanity was either extinct or had chosen to ignore their former home's plight. Admiral Quindara prepared her forces for what everyone expected to be the final battles. The core worlds would make their last stand against an enemy that had already proven unstoppable. The great civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia prepared for extinction. Then the impossible happened. Deep space monitors at the edge of Andromeda detection range picked up quantum signatures that had not been seen in the galaxy for over a century. Human ships were dropping out of fold space at coordinates that should have been empty void. Captain Ben Rodriguez of the UES Vengeance was the first human to speak to the galaxy since the exile. His message was broadcast to every remaining free world and caused celebrations that had not been seen since the early days of galactic civilization. Galaxy calling Earth, Earth responding. "We heard your message. We are coming home. Hold your positions and prepare for immediate military support." What followed changed everything that galactic civilization thought it knew about warfare and technology. Human ships began materializing throughout the war zone using technologies that violated fundamental laws of physics. They appeared from impossible angles and attacked with weapons that should not have been able to exist. The first engagement between human forces and the Devourers took place at the ruins of the Vega system. Captain Steve Walsh led a squadron of human fighters against a Devourer conversion fleet that was processing the remains of 3 dead worlds. "All units, this is Chaos Leader," Walsh transmitted to his pilots. "Forget everything you learned in training. We are going to make this up as we go along." The human attack broke every rule of space combat that had been established over thousands of years of galactic warfare. Fighters dove through enemy formations while ignoring their own safety. Ships changed course randomly to avoid predictable flight paths. Weapons were fired in patterns that made no tactical sense, but it worked. The Devourers had adapted to counter every logical strategy that galactic forces could devise. They were completely unprepared for tactics that had no logic at all. Human. Pilots achieved objectives by doing things that no sane commander would ever order. Admiral Katie Foster arrived in the core systems with the main human battle fleet, just as the Devourers launched their final assault on the remaining free worlds. Her ships were unlike anything that had been seen in galactic space. They combined technologies from dozens of different human colonies in ways that should have been incompatible. "Galaxy Command, this is Admiral Foster of the Human Expeditionary Force. We are taking operational control of all military assets in this sector. Prepare for immediate tactical coordination." The battle for the core worlds became the turning point in the war against the Devourers. Admiral Foster deployed strategies that made Dr. Yelnara's research look conservative by comparison. Human forces attacked in formations that changed continuously during combat. They used weapons that adapted their functions in real time based on battlefield conditions. Most importantly, they made decisions that no computer could predict because they were based on intuition and creativity rather than logical analysis. When the Devourers tried to adapt to human tactics, the humans simply changed their approach completely. Lieutenant Amy Parker led a boarding party onto a Devourer ship using nothing but vacuum suits and improvised weapons. Her mission briefing was typical of human military planning. "We are going to get inside their ship and break everything we can find until they stop trying to eat our galaxy. Any questions?" The boarding action succeeded not because it followed established procedures but because it was completely insane by galactic military standards. The Devourers had no defensive protocols for dealing with organic beings who deliberately put themselves in mortal danger to achieve tactical objectives. But the humans had not just survived their exile. They had thrived by embracing the unpredictability that had made them outcasts. The civilization they had built in the dark between galaxies was unlike anything that had ever existed. Captain Dan Cooper explained human philosophy to the amazed representatives of the Galactic Council during a brief break in the fighting. "You exiled us because you thought chaos was dangerous. You were right. Chaos is dangerous to anyone who tries to control it or predict it. But chaos is also the source of all innovation and creativity. When you removed chaos from your galaxy, you removed the ability to adapt to unexpected challenges. The human colonies had spent over a century developing technologies and strategies based on controlled chaos. They had learned to harness unpredictability as a tool for solving problems that logical approaches could not handle. Their ships, their weapons, and their tactics all incorporated random elements that made them impossible to counter systematically. The war against the Devourers continued for 7 more years, but the outcome was never in doubt once humanity returned. The machines that had seemed unstoppable against ordered civilizations found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by an alliance that had learned to think like humans. The final battle took place in the converted ruins of the old human homeworld. Earth had been one of the first planets that the Devourers had transformed, but the humans wanted it back, regardless of what it had become. "This is our home, Admiral," Foster declared as the human fleet approached the mechanical structures that had once been forests and oceans. "Whatever they have done to it, we are taking it back." The assault on converted Earth was the largest military operation in galactic history. Every remaining species contributed forces to the attack, but the humans led the way with tactics that defied every principle of logical warfare. They fought with an intensity that amazed their alien allies and terrified their mechanical enemies. When the last Devourer ship was destroyed, the galaxy had been forever changed. The Galactic Council was restructured to include human representatives, not just as members but as permanent advisors on unconventional solutions. The position became known as the Chaos Seat, and it was always filled by a human. Ambassador Dan Cooper took the first Chaos Seat and delivered a speech that was recorded in every history database across the galaxy. "You exiled us because you thought we were too dangerous. You were right. We are dangerous to stagnation, dangerous to tyranny, and dangerous to any force that threatens innocent life. The universe is chaotic, and sometimes chaos is exactly what you need to survive." The galaxy that emerged from the Devourer war was louder, messier, and infinitely more alive than the perfect civilization that had existed before the crisis. Innovation flourished as species learned to embrace uncertainty. Art became wild and experimental again. Birth rates climbed as beings rediscovered the excitement of an unpredictable future. Dr. Yelnara established the Institute for Chaotic Studies, where researchers from across the galaxy came to learn human problem-solving techniques. The Institute's motto was carved above its entrance in letters that could be seen from orbit. "Order without chaos is death. Chaos without order is meaningless. Balance between them is life." Human colonies were re-established throughout the galaxy, but they were different from the worlds that had been abandoned over a century before. The new human settlements incorporated lessons learned during their exile. They became centers of innovation and creativity that attracted visitors from every species in the galaxy. The restored Earth became a symbol of renewal and hope. The mechanical structures left by the Devourers were converted into monuments celebrating the diversity and unpredictability that had saved galactic civilization. Gardens and forests grew around technological marvels that reminded everyone of the price of seeking perfect order. Trade networks expanded as human entrepreneurs opened new routes and established markets in regions that had been considered too risky for commerce. Human artists created works that inspired beings who had forgotten what it meant to be surprised by beauty.